They say a person's life can be reduced to the quiet choices they make when no one's looking. But I've come to believe that it's not just those choices. It's the ones you make when everyone is watching and still refuses to see you. I was 15 the first time I realized my brother Ryan wasn't just the golden boy of our family. He was their chosen myth, sculpted in charm and polished in denial. And I was the narrator, the invisible chronicler of his carefully maintained facade. Growing up in a household that treated charisma like a virtue and intuition like an inconvenience, I learned to live in my own head. I memorized patterns, how Mom's voice rose by exactly 3 notes when she talked about Ryan's potential, how Dad's eyes lit up at Ryan's mediocre report cards, but glazed over when I brought home straight A's. Ryan didn't have to be brilliant. He only had to look like he was. He was the kind of child who could set the shed on fire and walk away with a marshmallow grin, while I got scolded for not putting the matches out of his reach. It was always my job to anticipate the damage before it happened, to sweep up the debris and smile as if the ashes didn't smell like loss. One summer evening, around the time puberty hit Ryan like a perfectly timed blessing, tall, tousled, and tragically handsome, I caught him sneaking out through the side window. We were 13 and 15. He was supposed to be grounded, supposed to be remorseful for something I couldn't even remember anymore. All I knew was that he flashed that sly grin, the one that melted Mom's fury into amused sighs, and whispered, "Cover for me, Lise? You know you're the responsible one." And I did. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, pretending to read while rehearsing lies in my head. I told myself it was harmless, that he'd be back before midnight, that maybe this time he'd realize I was the one who kept saving him. He didn't. The next morning, when he stumbled in reeking of sweat and perfume, I didn't say anything. Not even when Mom asked where he was all night. He winked at me. She barely looked up from her coffee. "He's just adventurous," she said to no one in particular. I love that about him. I opened my mouth, just for a second, but closed it again. Because what was the point of speaking into a void that had already decided its own echo? That was the first time I buried my voice. It wasn't the last. As the years passed, Ryan perfected the art of emotional theft. He took what he wanted from people, their time, their trust, their softness, and left just enough charm behind to keep them from noticing the bruise. He dated girls who cried behind lockers and lied for him in group projects. He cheated on tests and got recommendations for leadership roles. He lied to our parents about getting into honors programs, and they sent him gift cards just because we're proud. I remember one girlfriend, Natalie. Sweet, wide-eyed, and heartbreakingly loyal. She would wait in the rain outside our house, holding Tupperware of pasta for him because she heard he skipped lunch. He'd show up an hour late, smelling like someone else's shampoo, and still she'd smile. I asked him once, quietly, when no one else was around, "Do you even like her?" He rolled his eyes, tossed a basketball from one hand to the other, and shrugged. "She's convenient. She likes me more than I like her. That's balance." I tried to tell Mom. I said it gently, carefully, like holding a shard of glass and hoping not to bleed. "Ryan isn't serious about her," I said. "He uses people." She blinked. Then she laughed. "Sweetheart, that's how boys are at that age. Besides, it's not your place to say. Ryan's just confident. Charismatic." That word again. Charismatic. Like it excused every cruelty. So I stopped trying. I watched from the sidelines, the invisible sister who always stayed behind to lock the doors Ryan left open. And I watched him build his little kingdom, one charming lie at a time. And then the wedding invitation came. It was a cream envelope with gold foil lettering that spelled out my brother's full name like it was a brand. "Ryan Christopher Morgan and Emily Grace Lawrence request the honor of your presence." Emily. A name I'd never heard before. Not once. No family dinners. No accidental mentions. No social media tags. Just boom, engaged. And the strangest part? His voice message when I didn't answer the phone that day. "Hey Lise, big news. Getting hitched. You'll love Emily. She's exactly what I need. You'll see. We're doing things a little fast, but when you know, you know. Right? I listened to that message 6 times. And each time, it felt more like a victory lap than a wedding announcement. There was something off in his voice, too triumphant, too rehearsed, like he wasn't just happy. He was declaring a win. But what game had he been playing? I RSVP'd yes. Not because I was excited. Not because I wanted to see him. But because something in me had started to stir. A voice I hadn't used in years. And this time, I wasn't going to ignore it. The first thing I noticed wasn't the music or the flowers or even the sweeping arches of the wedding venue. It was the way people whispered when they thought no one was listening. Low tones. Tilted heads. Quick glances that darted like minnows across a glassy pond. The kind of whispers you get at a funeral where someone shows up in white. But this wasn't a funeral. It was my brother's wedding. And everyone was smiling like their jaws had been wired into place. The venue was exactly what I should have expected. Over the top. Polished to within an inch of its soul. Ivory columns climbed towards chandeliers the size of my first apartment, and everything, absolutely everything, glowed with this artificial warmth that only money and obsession can buy. From the manicured rose garden out front to the wine list that read like a sommelier's dream journal, this place screamed perfection. The kind that photographs beautifully but always feels just a few degrees too cold. I adjusted the strap of my navy dress and stepped further into the crowd, heels clicking against marble that shone like still water. Ryan had outdone himself. Again. People turned to greet me with the kind of politeness you reserve for distant relatives and coworkers you don't actually like. A few hugged me. Most didn't. And not one person said my name. Just, you must be Ryan's sister. The Golden Sun's sister. As if I didn't exist outside the orbit of his glow. Then I saw her. Emily. She moved through the crowd like a beam of sunlight that hadn't realized it had entered a thunderstorm. Her dress was simple but perfect, the kind of ivory that whispers rather than shouts. Her smile, genuine, open, soft, was the exact opposite of everything I had expected from the woman who agreed to marry my brother. I thought she'd be cold, calculating, maybe even complicit in whatever game Ryan was playing. But she wasn't. She was good. She found me before I could find her. Touched my arm with fingers so light they barely registered. "You're Elise, right?" she said, with a warmth that didn't feel rehearsed. "Ryan's told me so much about you." I wanted to scoff. I wanted to roll my eyes and say, "Oh, I'm sure he has." But something in her gaze stopped me. There was no malice there. No irony. Just sincere, hopeful curiosity. As if she really wanted to know who I was, and what I thought, and whether we might become sisters in more than name. "I'm so glad you could come," she continued. "I've been dying to meet you. Ryan says you're the smart one. The smart one. Not the quiet one. Not the difficult one. Not the moody one. Smart." I blinked. "Thanks," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. "I'm glad to be here." And for a moment, I almost was. We talked. About work. About books. About dogs and coffee and the absurdity of wedding favors shaped like mini champagne bottles. I laughed. She did too. She wasn't just nice, she was real. A full person. Not just another prop in Ryan's carefully curated play. And with every word she spoke, every glance she cast his way, I felt the tightening of something ugly in my chest. Because she loved him. She really, truly did. And he didn't deserve it. That realization was like ice in my stomach. It didn't surprise me, not really. But it cut deeper than I thought it would. Watching her smile at him from across the garden, oblivious to the hairline cracks already splintering the porcelain dream around her, made me want to scream. Or run. Or both. Because Ryan? Ryan wasn't smiling back. He was checking his phone. Over and over. He'd glance down at the screen, swipe, type something quickly, and then slip it back into his jacket like a magician hiding a dirty trick. When someone approached him, a groomsman, an aunt, a family friend. He offered only clipped replies, half smirks, and nods that meant nothing. I watched him brush off one of his college friends with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then that same friend turned, glanced at another man near the bar, and said something low and sharp. "I can't believe he's doing this today." Just 6 words. Whispered. But I heard them. And they buried themselves under my skin like splinters made of truth. The ceremony began just after sunset. The air had turned soft with that twilight haze that makes everything feel like a dream. Rows of guests shifted in their seats. The string quartet played something delicate. And Ryan stood at the altar with the confidence of a man who thought the world owed him applause just for showing up. Emily walked down the aisle, and for a second, I forgot everything. Because she was radiant. Not in that rehearsed, bridal magazine kind of way, but in the way a person shines when they believe, completely, that love is going to save them. They stood facing each other beneath a floral arch that probably cost more than my yearly salary. The officiant welcomed everyone, spoke briefly about commitment and joy and building a life together. Then turned to Ryan for his vows. He cleared his throat, smiled, and then everything broke. "There's one last thing I need to say before we begin our forever," Ryan said, his voice loud and clear, as if he were delivering a TED Talk instead of standing in front of the woman he was about to marry. Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression still warm but expectant. And then he said it. "I have 3 kids." The words landed like shrapnel. There was a collective inhale from the audience, a ripple of confusion, disbelief, tension so thick you could choke on it. Ryan continued, completely unfazed. 2 different women. One lives in Arizona. The other in Philly. It was all before Emily, obviously. We're all adults here. Just wanted everything on the table, you know. A pause. A smile. A smirk. As if he had just shared an amusing anecdote about parking tickets or losing a bet. Emily's face didn't change all at once. It shifted in slow motion. Her eyes blinked too fast. Her lips parted slightly. And then she smiled. Not a real smile. The kind of smile you wear when your body hasn't caught up to your heart and your mind is trying desperately to protect you from the truth. Someone in the back coughed. The officiant looked at the binder in his hands like maybe he'd missed a page. And I couldn't move. Because my brother, my charming, untouchable, golden brother, had just detonated his wedding with the same casual cruelty he used to apply to high school girlfriends and expired friendships. And he thought it was funny. He thought it was brave. Transparent. Mature. Emily turned slowly toward the crowd, her expression straining under the weight of something enormous and invisible. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply walked one slow, deliberate step after another down the aisle she had just floated up, her train dragging behind her like a shroud. She didn't look at anyone. Not even me. I watched her slip through the crowd, through the open archway, through the illusion that had held her so delicately until it snapped. And then she was gone. Just like that. And Ryan? Ryan adjusted his cufflinks, looked out over the crowd, and laughed. As if he'd just told the best joke of his life. There's a kind of silence that settles after chaos, not the gentle, healing kind that brings peace, but the suffocating kind that wraps around your chest and squeezes until every breath feels borrowed. That was the air I woke up to the morning after my brother detonated his own wedding. It wasn't grief or confusion that filled the hallways of my rented room. It was shame. Cold, acrid, and sharp as broken glass. I hadn't slept much, not really. I'd lain awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my guest room at the inn, replaying the look on Emily's face over and over again. The way her expression didn't fall all at once, but fractured slowly, like porcelain cracking under heat. I kept seeing her back as she walked away, slow and trembling, her dress a ghost trailing behind her. I should have followed her then. I should have stood up and walked after her. But I didn't. I froze. Like I always do. By 7:30 the next morning, I was dressed and in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles paled. The inn's front desk clerk, a kind-faced woman with half-laced sneakers and a name tag that read Judy, didn't ask any questions when I showed up and asked if Emily Morgan had checked in the night before. She just gave me a long look, full of sympathy and unspoken understanding, then pointed down the hall. "Room 6, she said softly. She came in real late. Looked like she needed sleep more than air. I stood outside room 6 for a full minute before I knocked. I don't know what I was expecting, a scream, a slammed door, maybe even tears on the other side of the wood. But when Emily opened it, she didn't do any of those things. She just looked hollow. Her eyes were swollen and rimmed with red, the kind of red that comes from hours of crying with no one to hold you. Her hair, which had been curled and pinned so delicately the day before, now hung loose around her face, tangled and damp like she'd slept in a storm. She wore an oversized sweater and a pair of shorts that didn't match, and her feet were bare on the cold tile floor. "Elise," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the last syllable. "I didn't think anyone would come. Can I come in?" I asked, quieter than I meant to be. She nodded, stepping aside without another word. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight, a half-drunk glass of water sweating on the nightstand. The bed was unmade, the comforter a mess of knots and folds, and a tissue box sat on the desk surrounded by crumpled casualties. I sat on the edge of the chair, unsure how close was too close. For a few minutes, we said nothing. She paced. I waited. Then, like a dam cracking under pressure, she finally let it spill. "I didn't know," she said, her voice shaky and fragile. "He never told me. Not once. Not even a hint." Her hands gripped the sleeves of her sweater, tugging the fabric down like she was trying to wrap herself in something that might keep her from unraveling entirely. I nodded but stayed silent, letting her find her way through the story. "I knew he had a past," she continued, sitting down across from me, her legs pulled up like a child hiding from thunder. "I mean, everyone does. But kids? 3 of them? That's not a secret you'd just forget to mention. That's not something you accidentally omit." Her voice rose, sharper now, edged with fury that felt more familiar. "We've talked about having children. Names. Traditions. What kind of parents we'd be. He asked me if I wanted 2 or 3, Elise. And the whole time he already had 3. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk, let the words fall like shattered glass, and tried not to flinch as she gutted herself open in front of me. "I asked him about it," she said, her hands shaking as she reached for another tissue. "Right after the ceremony. He tried to act like it was nothing. Said he was just being honest, and that he didn't want to start our life together, with secrets. He said he was trying to be noble." I nearly laughed. Because that was so Ryan it hurt. Then her voice lowered. "But then, I checked his phone. I know I shouldn't have. I know that's wrong, but I did. And there was a message. From one of the women. Tara, I think. Sent 2 days ago. She said if he didn't tell me, she would. She said she was done covering for him." Everything in me clenched. Of course. Ryan hadn't confessed because he was brave or honorable. He confessed because someone else had grabbed the matches and threatened to burn his stage to the ground. So he stepped into the fire first. That way, when it all went up in flames, he could pretend it had been his choice all along. "I don't even know who I married," Emily whispered, her eyes glassy again. "Or if I even did, was that a marriage? Does it count when you're lied to from the moment you say yes?" I reached across the space between us and placed my hand over hers. For once, I had no sarcasm. No bitterness. Only sorrow. For her. For me. For all the people who ever loved my brother and thought they were safe. "I think you're brave," I said. She laughed bitterly. "That makes one of us." By noon, she'd made the call. The annulment was filed by 3 o'clock. The marriage lasted less than 24 hours. And by 4, my phone started ringing. First it was my mother. Elise, you need to talk to her, she snapped. Emily is being ridiculous. Your brother was trying to do the right thing. Then my father. She embarrassed him. Walked out like a child. That poor boy was just trying to be honest. Poor boy. I let them rant. I let them blame her. I let them paint Ryan as the wounded hero trying to rebuild his life while the cruel, irrational woman threw it all away over a little history. And then I exploded. Are you kidding me? I shouted into the phone. He lied to her. He built a marriage on omission and manipulation. He humiliated her in front of hundreds of people, and you're defending him. Elise. No, I snapped. You don't get to twist this into another Ryan sob story. You raised him like he could do no wrong, and now you're shocked he grew up thinking the rules didn't apply to him. Silence. Then the line went dead. I knew what that meant. I was officially the problem now. Later that week, I drove to a rundown apartment complex 2 towns over. I'd found Tara's name in Emily's phone. Just a first name and a city. It took me 2 hours of social media stalking and 1 awkward call to a bakery she'd once tagged in a photo to find her. She was tired. That was the first thing I noticed. Not old, not sick. Just exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones when you've carried too many people on your back for too long. She invited me in without asking why I was there. Maybe she already knew. I figured one of you would come eventually, she said, setting down a chipped mug of coffee that smelled more like survival than pleasure. We talked. About Ryan. About the kids. About all the half-promises he made, and the ways he kept her just close enough to feel obligated, but never close enough to feel safe. He sees them once a month, she said. If that. Sends money when he feels like it. Sometimes a toy or two. But he never told me about Emily. Not once. If I'd known, I would have warned her. I nodded. She's out now. She annulled it. Tara exhaled. A slow, painful kind of relief. Good. She didn't deserve that. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry at her. Or at Emily. Or even at myself. I just felt tired. Because all of us, Tara, Emily, and I, we were the collateral damage of someone else's golden glow. On the drive home, I thought about guilt. Not the sharp, stinging kind that comes when you do something wrong. But the heavy, aching kind that comes when you don't do enough. When you stay quiet because it's easier. When you watch someone build their castle out of other people's hearts and say nothing because you're afraid of being called bitter. I should have said something years ago. I should have told Emily the truth the second I met her. I should have warned her that Ryan doesn't break people loudly. He does it in whispers. In omissions. In half-truths and smirks and moments that feel like accidents, but are really architecture. I didn't speak. And now it's too late. But maybe not for the next one. Maybe this time, I won't stay quiet. There's a moment in every family drama where the curtain falls and the illusion ends, not with applause, but with a silence so total it feels like judgment. That moment for me wasn't the wedding, and it wasn't even the annulment. It came days later, in Ryan's backyard, while the sun blistered the pavement and our parents hovered inside, pretending they couldn't hear the shouting. He sat there in his too expensive patio chair, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, one leg crossed over the other like a smug king surveying his ruined kingdom. I stood, fists clenched at my sides, heart hammering not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of everything I'd carried for far too long. You don't even get it, do you? I said, voice tight, the fury pressed so close to the surface it burned. You ruined that girl. You humiliated her. You lied to her face every single day and then dropped the truth like it was a party favor. Ryan didn't flinch. He never flinches. He just shrugged, as if what I'd said was an opinion about the weather or the taste of the wine in his glass. I told her eventually, didn't I? He replied, as though that line was supposed to exonerate him. She had a right to know, and I gave her the truth. What more do you want? I felt something snap behind my ribs. A thread, a boundary, a limit I hadn't even known I still had. You told her in front of 200 people, Ryan, I said, the words like glass underfoot. You waited until she was in a dress she paid for, at an altar she walked to alone, surrounded by people she thought were there to witness love, not betrayal. He rolled his eyes, waving the wine glass dismissively. She would have found out eventually. Better it came from me than someone else. And that's what you think this is? I asked, stunned. Some kind of ethical checkmark? You think because you said it out loud, you get a pass. You're being dramatic, Elise. This is what you always do. Blow things out of proportion. Pick sides that don't belong to you. I took a step closer, so he'd see me fully, so he couldn't pretend I was just a voice in the wind, easy to ignore. You're right, I said, my voice dropping into something sharper, something earned. I'm picking sides. And for once, it's not yours. His jaw tensed. Family is supposed to have your back, he muttered, not looking at me now. Even when things get messy. And there it was. That line. The weapon. The phrase that had been thrown at me since I was 10 years old and caught him breaking into Mom's jewelry box. Since I was 13 and lied to cover for him sneaking out with someone else's girlfriend. Since every Christmas, birthday, and family reunion where I was told to stay quiet, to be kind, to keep the peace. Family is supposed to have your back. It was never a promise. It was a demand. And it was always used to silence me. I walked away that afternoon without saying another word. Because if I stayed, I would have said all the things that still had teeth. And I wasn't about to bleed just to make him feel better. But silence doesn't mean surrender. The next week, I made a list. Names, dates, places. I reached out to Tara first, the woman I'd met just days earlier, who'd offered me coffee and quiet truth without expecting anything in return. Then to Megan, a woman Ryan had dated briefly years ago who now lived in Phoenix with a 4-year-old boy named Caleb and a mortgage she was drowning in. I thought I was crazy, Megan told me on the phone, voice cracking mid-sentence. He told me we weren't serious. That I should move on. That the baby wasn't even his. I sent her the paternity paperwork Ryan had tried to bury. He never even contested it. Just signed it, paid a few $100 one time, and disappeared like fog in morning light. One by one, I found them. Not to expose him. Not to shame him. But to help them. Babysitting. Grocery runs. Legal referrals. Emotional support. I wasn't trying to fix the damage. That would have implied I believed I could. I wasn't naive enough for that anymore. But I could do something. I could show up. I could be the family they were never given, the kind of loyalty Ryan used like a shield but never truly offered. Tara and I started meeting once a month for coffee. Not to talk about him, but to talk about everything else. Work. Parenting. Grief. Anger. Sometimes she'd bring her daughter, Chloe, and I'd hold her while Tara drank her latte with 2 hands for the first time in weeks. Megan sent me photos of Caleb's drawings. Little stick figures with capes and stars and names written in shaky crayon letters. I pinned one to my fridge. Not because I'm his aunt. Not because I owe him anything. But because someone should see it. Someone should believe that what he made matters. My parents didn't understand. Scratch that. They didn't try to. The first time I mentioned helping Tara, my mother's mouth tightened into a purse-string knot of disapproval. Why are you getting involved? She asked, setting down her knitting with more force than necessary. This isn't your responsibility. Maybe not, I replied calmly. But someone has to take responsibility. And clearly, it's not him. She didn't speak after that. Just picked up her yarn and pulled the thread so hard it snapped. Dad wasn't better. You're making a scene, he said when I skipped the next family dinner. You're turning your back on your own brother. I'm not turning my back, I said. I'm just not covering his anymore. They didn't invite me the next time. I didn't ask. But word got back to me anyway, how they sat around the table and toasted to family and forgiveness. How Ryan gave some speech about rebuilding and moving forward. How they all clapped when he called me confused, but still loved. Confused. Still loved. Translation: controlled narrative, status maintained. It didn't matter. Because I had chosen my side. Not out of spite. Not out of rebellion. But out of moral clarity. There comes a time when silence becomes complicity. And I had lived complicit for far too long. I wrote the letter to Emily 2 months later. I didn't know if she'd read it. I didn't know if she'd care. But I needed her to know. I told her that she was brave. That walking away didn't make her weak, it made her free. That the strength it takes to leave something beautiful on the outside, but rotting within, is the kind of strength most people only understand when it's too late. I told her I was sorry. Not for Ryan. But for not warning her sooner. For not speaking when I should have. For watching the trap close and not calling out until after the snap. I told her I believed her. Because sometimes that's all someone needs to hear. She wrote back 4 months later. The envelope was plain, the handwriting small and careful. Inside, a single folded page. She thanked me. She said she was building something new brick by brick, day by day. That she'd started therapy. That she'd adopted a dog named Lucy who barked at strangers, but loved to cuddle at night. That she still had nightmares, but they were getting quieter. And then, near the bottom of the page, she wrote one line that I read over and over again until it blurred. It helped, knowing someone believed me. I taped that line inside my journal. Not because I needed validation, but because I needed to remember. Moral courage isn't loud. It doesn't roar. It doesn't stand on tables and declare war. It starts in small places. In quiet rooms. In long, unglamorous moments of choosing to do what's right, even when it costs everything. And sometimes, all it takes is one person stepping out of the shadows to remind others they're not alone. I wasn't the hero of this story. There's a kind of weight that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't show up in boxes or bags or ledger lines. It's the weight of memory, of history, of the moments that shaped us without our permission. I carry that weight now not as a burden, but as a responsibility. Because some legacies aren't inherited. They're chosen. And I've chosen mine. It's been over a year since the wedding that didn't end in a kiss, but in a quiet undoing. Ryan hasn't spoken to me since our last fight, the one where he accused me of betrayal, and I finally let him hear the sound of my boundaries slamming shut. He moved out of state a few months after that. New apartment, new job, new girlfriend already. Instagram-ready smiles. Weekend getaways. Selfies with captions like "new beginnings" and "growth looks good on me." As if none of it ever happened. As if Emily had been a minor plot twist in his season of self-discovery. He posts filtered snapshots of brunches and beaches, each one curated to say, "I am fine. I am thriving. I am untouched by consequence." But he never posts about Maya. She's 10 now. Sharp-eyed and shy, with a mind like a locked diary, pages full of thoughts she's not sure she's allowed to share. I see her twice a month, sometimes more when Tara needs a break, which, let's be honest, is most of the time. She works long shifts, juggles bills like a magician with one hand tied, and still manages to pack lunches with handwritten notes inside. But even superheroes need rest. So, I step in when I can. Not to replace anyone. Not to fix what can't be undone. Just to be there. Maya was hesitant at first. Understandably. I was the sister of the man who dropped in and out of her life like a faulty porch light. She didn't know what I wanted from her. If I was another adult who'd vanish without warning or lecture her about being grateful for breadcrumbs. So I didn't talk. I listened. I sat with her on the floor while she drew comics of dragon-riding girls who saved cities no one else could defend. I watched her piece together jigsaw puzzles upside down because she liked the challenge. I let her lead. Let her ask questions. Let her say no. And slowly, like a door creaking open after a long winter, she began to let me in. One afternoon, while we sat on a worn picnic blanket outside the community center, she asked me the question I'd known would come eventually. "Do you think my dad loves me?" I didn't rush to answer. because truth deserves time, and lies live in haste. I think I said carefully that your dad has a lot of growing up to do. And sometimes, people who haven't grown up don't know how to love the way others need. She nodded slowly, chewing on a string of licorice, her eyes scanning the sky like it held better answers than I could give. But that's not your fault, Maya. That's never your fault. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she leaned into me, her head resting against my arm, and that was all I needed to know. I never badmouth Ryan. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but because Maya doesn't. She deserves truth, yes, but not bitterness. She deserves to hear that her worth isn't tied to his absence or his approval. That she is valuable not in spite of his neglect, but entirely independent of it. With her, I am what I never had, a witness who stays, a voice that doesn't shrink, a presence that doesn't flinch. Sometimes, when she's asleep on the couch, curled beneath the blanket I crocheted one anxious winter, I think about what it means to be a sibling. Not the Hallmark version. Not the sitcom archetype. But the raw, unfiltered reality of it. It's loving someone whose flaws are bigger than your comfort. It's wanting to protect them even as they hurt you. It's hoping they change even when they show no signs of trying. And, eventually, it's choosing not to lie for them. Not to excuse them. Not to let their damage become your inheritance. It's saying, I love you, but I will not enable you. And sometimes it's saying, I love the people you hurt more than I can protect your image. That choice costs. God, does it cost? Family gatherings are hollow now. Invitations stop coming. My parents send updates through strained phone calls, voices tight with disappointment. They think I've chosen the wrong side. That I'm airing dirty laundry. That I've betrayed blood. But blood isn't the same as bond. And loyalty without accountability is just complicity in nicer clothes. I don't miss the performances. The fake smiles over dry turkey. The whispered judgments behind closed doors. I miss the idea of what family could have been, but I no longer mourn what it never was. Instead, I invest in what I can change. I volunteer at Maya's school now. Help organize art supplies for the after-school program. Stay late to stack chairs and sweep glitter from the floor. I keep a stack of backup permission slips and a pouch of emergency snacks in my car. Just in case. And today, Maya's school is putting on a play. Nothing fancy. Construction paper crowns. Bed sheets as capes. Cardboard castles held together with duct tape and dreams. I'm in the third row, right side, wedged between two exhausted parents and a grandma knitting something purple with furious intensity. I hold my phone in my lap, not to record, Maya asked me not to, but just in case she wants a photo afterward. The lights dim, the curtain rises, and there she is. My niece, my heart, in a blue tunic and a lopsided sword belt, standing tall beneath the stage lights like she was born for the role. She's not the lead. Doesn't need to be. She has one line. Delivers it with a fierce little nod, like a knight pledging loyalty to a kingdom of her own making. The audience claps politely. I clap louder. No one knows who I am. No one sees me. I'm not in the spotlight. I'm not meant to be. And that's the point. Some people choose to shine in the spotlight. To center themselves, to demand applause, to make every moment about their reflection. Others quietly hold the light. Others sweep the stage, glue the crowns, wait in the wings with tissues and hugs and water bottles that aren't even asked for but always needed. And sometimes, that's the only way the darkness doesn't win.